Hey, it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful empowered harmonizers. We are zooming in and focusing in on a great viewer question that talks about sort of erratic behavior, impulsive behavior, just sort of like emotional outbursts that are sort of these sort of cute temper tantrums that they see from their partner, their significant other. And is this to be tolerated, or, it seems to bother this viewer and not so much like the rest of the friends or family. And so to understand that, I think that's a great viewer question, because when we talk about someone who's narcissistic, these are people who crave attention. They want to be stroked. They want to be pet. They want to be coddled and coaxed to. They want to be paraded. They want to be the star of the show, the galaxy, or larger, whatever that might mean, in their opulence, their glow, their charisma, whatever it is that they might possess, which truly can be a strong and endearing and enamoring part of their personality. But oftentimes it can be used as a tool, a weapon, or sort of a defense pushback mechanism. And it comes across as very prickly, very uncomfortable, very sort of heated, just as if it's crackling with air, the energy. I mean, as if you can hear their skin crackling on their, you can hear their skin crackling, says the feather. Let's go. So in other words, they get so heated up, so seethed, you can see like a bubbling, river of sweat just beginning to permeate them, as if it's just going to come forward, and they're having just a real just sort of moment, and it's just like they're going to engulf you, and you can see the perspiration, or like their the way that their hair starts to curl, or even anything, it. I mean, they do whatever sort of micro movement that they have, and they might do the quick brace of like one foot, or the really exaggerated disappointment. That's talk about a real drum bopper, when they, and they do that, as if like you're so tiresome, you're such a bore, because people just don't understand kings or queens, like they're saying, like me. In other words, they feel that, they're skeptical about other people. They don't feel bad. They just want to push them off and walk away the other direction. It doesn't matter to them whether they want to play. They want to be the center of attention. They don't just they love and they crave attention, and eventually like power and control when it gets really bad. And then, they kind of rule. These temper tantrums, even from an adult, become like a ruler. I mean, as if they're shaking an earthquake in their own kingdom all around them, just stand back. Like everybody just stay in place. Look at the ground. No smiling. Otherwise, and then you just know you could have a punishment coming, or you just better not make a peep. You better just not be yourself. You better not, and if this becomes repeated again and again, this feeling of engulfment, this feeling of like being shut down from someone who feels entitled to rule all the time, and unfortunately, they then sort of asphyxiate the room for conversation, discussion, openness. They're sort of, they're vacuous. In other words, they can suck up the air in a room just by their laughter. They're louder. Sometimes this is a great quality at certain things. I mean, maybe if they're, in a band, I mean, maybe that's a very great outdoor voice to have, to be like singing or something, like in a garage or a church or something, or a rock band, but not when they're sort of, beating on you or berating you in a negative fashion, and especially trying to control others with a disappointed tone, as if it's been rehearsed and it means like, you're cut off, or in other words, it's not a two-way street. So that's why it's so cumbersome, and it's an unfair balance of power and individuation and self-actualization in a relationship with someone who is narcissistic or psychopathic, and that can interfere with intimacy, having a real relationship. Meaning, what happens, when you get a flat tire? What happens when you have to go to the doctor? What happens when something goes wrong with your health? What happens when something goes on with your job? How does that affect the relationship? Is every little thing like a deal breaker? Poor communication. In other words, they're not, they just sort of give you a mixed signal and sort of crash, you back. And so these temper tantrums, are a way for them to like rule the roost, like show you who's the rule, the lawmaker, the leader, the one who sets it all, who's responsible for everything here, but oftentimes it can be to the exclusion, meaning it makes other people feel like, oh, as if I'm in a different galaxy category, rung on a ladder, as if like you're up on a, maybe, you've got like French doors and you're, beckoning to your family as if you're, hello, I mean, it becomes a very uncomfortable family place, because it's just like if you have, some of our viewers have talked about, like if they had let's say like a military, let's say like you had someone who's a military, very structured, very regimented, very hierarchical set, and then they sort of bring that home, or the managerial tone that they use at work, like let's say they work in a big warehouse and they bring that home, or all sorts of different and sundry things where like they don't leave work at work, and they don't allow you to have a relationship pure and substantial, like with legs of its own oftentimes, especially how it's received and felt by the other recipient, especially for for other people. Why? Because they're not able to be heard, seen, felt, or delved into, and then those people then get, they get into a strange situation where then, they get used to that treatment, and then oftentimes they will stay put because they are sort of in this enmeshment or supply or this need base of experience in the relationship. But the tantrum is a way to rule make, and it's just like the reward is when the others are quiet, and that's kind of a negative, a little bit of a negative when it comes to what you're trying to message, you're trying to send, is it's better when you're quiet. It's better when you just shut it, when you disappear. It's better when you're not here. The messages that you're sending, or, especially if there's a big age difference, with kids, that can be received very harshly, I think, by younger children, because the parents are indeed so much more mature, intelligent, advanced, etc. So like in different stages of their own lives, like number one, and then family is coming like maybe after they have adapted some very, strong, resilient ways of being, like, like that are really required to be like, you're required to be like full on, and you can't like just abandon that and become like a whole different Houdini, become a whole different perspective and like approach and things. That's not fair to that person, but oftentimes that is how they are now, or that's maybe just part of what they endear about themselves. And that is okay. I mean, if they, oftentimes their own little temper tantrums, what are originally would sting others, eventually get others to laugh. And then like that's how the narcissist continues to rule a situation, a family system, an organization, a band, whatever sort of group is. They have sort of certain sneers or ways about them that get them into sort of that advanced footing. Like they set themselves apart. And with that, they always have a quip or a comeback. They can be very quick on their feet, and they are, of course, endeared to that type of attention getting. You have to realize that these people have an insatiable need for power and control. They don't want or like to relinquish that. Their identity oftentimes is interwoven into what you're asking them to give up. So for them to be grown up and responsible is not how really that person foresees or maps out like what would be best for them right now. They're thinking about like, what's best for me right now? And it might be different and oftentimes non-committal feeling to others, which of course is not fair to others because you feel like, you know, they're getting away with something in the relationship and it becomes combative. It becomes not friendly. It can become, you know, like you're then just married to be married and then acting how you're married supposed to be, or boyfriend and girlfriend, or if you know, the psychopath or this narcissist who's in the temper tantrums is at the employer, then you just would act like the regular, you know, employee, you know, and not really be able to communicate. You'd have to you'd feel backed down. You'd feel shut down, you know, and oftentimes a narcissist or psychopath, they pride themselves on having this strength bully side or whatever it is that they themselves can get away with. Why? Because that's how they like to have a leg up. No matter what the situation, they like to be sort of, you know, that bobbing in and out of conversations or relationships to kind of like have all things covered. But sometimes there's always another layer. There's something, you know, you always feel like they're maybe not looking there. They're looking sort of past you. They're in the future somewhere, you know, they're thinking about whatever they're going to do like later. Like, and it seems to trump your communication, your relationship even. It seems to be, well, of course, like assumed, entitled. There's a lot of assumptions. When there's too many assumptions going on in a relationship, it can make it very unfriendly and and very hostile because people always feel like they're on some sort of unwelcome grounds. Like they feel like they're the very ground that they're supposed to be like fabric or woven of, whatever the relationship, they feel that they're like being shredded or threaded out. Like just as soon as you have a grip, like all you've got is like a piece of string in your hand and you're just like, wait, I thought we were, you know, together on this. And then so they control this dynamic, this up and down. And anyone opt in for that type of relationship with a lot of sickening levels of up and down, meaning it makes you sick, it makes you worry. There's been affairs, there's been whatever sort of sardonic things have gone on. You know, maybe it's funny, maybe you had to joke about it, maybe things got in too deep or whatever, you know, something they did something or they neglected to do something, or there's just sort of that sort of debonair, like it's not my responsibility, I don't want any responsibilities, and that makes me. Like, in other words, they sort of like to get away with things. And just sort of like an alcoholic addict, like they always like to, you know, one thing that's said about the alcoholic is they always like to get away with things, like whether they're hiding or secretive or, you know, just sort of getting ahead of, getting around, being outside of the sight of is sort of that sort of command of the relationship. And the other eventually starts to feel shut out, or that they're not really being looked at. They kind of feel like they're looking at a wall, and you kind of feel oftentimes that they're not there. They're so gone in their mind, they're so gone in their presence, and they can exude that. Like especially when a narcissist doesn't want to be there. I mean, you can almost see like little maybe shakes that they're making, like maybe their eyes might be twitching, and you're like, oh my God, not this, you know. They're getting mad, they're getting, you know, and then, oh yeah, you know, and then you act like you're what's called walking on eggshells, you know, as if you're in the Garden of Eden, all of a sudden you're in the garden of, like, you know, snakes and other eating things at your ankles. You know, you're just like, well, how do we get here? You know, so it gets really something that needs to be unraveled. And it does need to get unraveled, I feel, at some point, because it gets to, like, there isn't a straight, it's not a linear sort of fashion of relationship. It can be sort of cyclical in nature, meaning, you know, and then they don't want you to sort of know where they're at. In other words, that's part of the allure. They have that very sort of commitment phobic sort of, you know, back off. And then oftentimes, you know, you think out of love, you know, you're gonna say, hey, well, oh, we didn't spend this holiday together, or, you know, oh, it's too early to do this, it's too early, I don't want to hurt them, or like come on too strong. And then, you know, you're not able to progress in the relationship because the narcissist or the psychopath is trying to control the channels, with the very channels with which the relationship is going, meaning you don't feel you have any influence, thrust, push, or dynamic. Like, it's not a together movement. It's sort of like, you know, it's them and then them complaining about what, you know, it's basically them just sort of kind of having a conversation of a relationship with themselves, and eventually no one ever, you know, matches up, or they're there for a specific amount of time or a very specific activity. It's sort of very segregated, isolated, like a slice of bread. They're, you know, we only do this, and then that might be like many times a week or many times a year or all the time, or but they have sort of this always like this getaway lever, you know, that they can like launch at any time. And then you're expected to not like break your neck, like, where do you guys go, or why, you know, why is it this late, or whatever the conundrum is, because there's going to be some chaos. There's going to be feeling like there's a lot of loose ends or loose ends and snooing. You know, or in the psychopath, they'll leave everything just so smooth. Then one little slip, and then you find, oh, you know, they're really not in this relationship at all how I had expected, or they had portended themselves to be, or facade, fake. Maybe a lot of it is digital. Nowadays, I think when people have relationships, a lot of that relationship is just gone online. It's gone to the phone. It's gone to these apps. It's gone all this stuff. And maybe, you know, you think it's great and you think it's awesome and it's super fun, or, you know, but to a certain degree, it's going to get tiresome, and there's always going to be a divide. So it's going to be all of a sudden, there's going to be like a counter to, you know, what's going to go on. So like what everybody's been trying to work for, you know, on some sort of Facebook, and I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not throwing anything in, but basically within a narcissist or psychopath relationship, there's always going to be sort of temper tantrum for them to get attention when they feel threatened, when any attention is being pulled from them, or things are getting real. I mean, like somebody gets hurt, somebody wants to talk, somebody just passed, you want to talk about something or plan for something, and it's got to be sort of on their kilter and their kilter only. And, you know, you kind of feel you're cut out, you know, and some people say, well, maybe that in the name of love, I will be like a cutout for this person. I will carve out my time. I will play second and third and 99th fiddle. I'll dial my, you know, headset down to 1. I'll let them, you know, maybe that I'll sacrifice, you know, and compromise so that they can be happy. I'll let them always have the floor. I'll let them speak up. I'll just remain in the quiet, hurt, and then anytime, you just, in other words, they will reinforce that backing down behavior, but then when they want all of your 110% attention back, it does not go both ways. It's like, do you want to play? You're out. It's just like, it's just that quick. You want to play, you want to pitch, you're out. I mean, they just, and even if you have like a lot of history with them, I mean, in other words, there's nothing really odd, but it will oftentimes, this temper tantrum will bring out the worst of people. They feel sometimes it'll bring out the best because you're like on, ER, you're like a doctor or a nurse, like on, who just came in, and then you're just like, oh my God, you're coming out from your desk, you're ripping off your devices, you're like putting everything down for them, and you're just like, oh my God, you're just like consumed in their effervescent personality, their good looks, their charm, their smile. They just know, I mean, their entry precedes them. You know what I'm saying? They have a way, they have a worldliness about them oftentimes, whatever it is, but, one moment. This is my crown. That is the amethyst. That goes right there. That oftentimes is, and it can be at the restaurant. You can't order your own meal. At the bar, you can't order your own drink. They have to have a sip of it, not just a sip. They'll drink an inch off of it, and you're like, like that was supposed to be my first and best sip, and they just took the total head off my drink. And then they're just like, and you're like, and they're like, the way that they say is like worth the sacrifice for you to give them. If I could just be so honored as to give you a sip off my drink. You always want to fill their cup, and you never, just sort of being with them is sort of your cup being full, because you really, in your heart of hearts, do love these people, because you're maybe a real attention giver, and really love to get close to people, and you love like that positive nurturing side, and boy, will they take advantage of that. Will they take advantage of that? They will take that, run that all the way to Alaska, Antarctica, Sydney, New York, California, and back. They will go as far as your fuel will take it. If you can hang in there 30 years, keep putting up the lumber, keep putting up the cement, keep putting up the glue, keep putting up the shingles, whatever it is you might, have to leap to, whether it be, it's always something to impress, and that can be a real positive. Together, two people, they can come together and coalesce and like become better together if they're independent enough, and they don't look to another person to make them happy. They can be happy on their own. As they say, happy for no reason. It's okay to like nature. It's okay to walk around in the forest and not always have some sort of device like on like 5-carat earrings. What do you got? You got 10 carats in each ear? What do you keep twisting and shining? What are they always trying to show off? Oftentimes these people can be, your first product, people who get the first product, so they always want to be ahead. The newer phone. Well, why wouldn't you want to check out the newer phone, the newer car, the newer, whatever it is, the newer furniture, the newer place to eat, the newer thing for the theater, and they're just sort of, your field can feel like sort of lost in the dust at some point. And that can be very unsettling, and it can cause people to feel very isolated. If you're with that sort of temper tantrum, rile up, and you get one of these sort of emergency room responses, like, sirens are going off and like doors are slamming open, and, doors are slamming, and you've got people's, cord things on their necks that they listen people heart with, what is your, pulse and everything, stethoscope. They're basically breaking their neck to be with, the narcissist, to please them, whether it's you're trying to bake something to perfection, and you're going all out and you've like totally stretched yourself out. Like, you're like, I'm showing you, I'm putting on the best. I'm putting on my A game. I know you love this. Let me make this for you. And they're like, and they're like, all done. That was delicious. Thank you very much. Here you go. In other words, they, oftentimes if you become, it's not that you're people pleasing, but you've felt that maybe that has been the way to define or, adapt in the relationship. In other words, when they're trying to, they oftentimes, someone who is narcissistic, they move groups of groups of friends very quickly. In other words, where they can kind of be in their false self. They will feel in their shining moments when they can really get the best shine for themselves, which is normal and natural, but oftentimes this is not in a stable place. This is not in, that's felt to be boring, mundane, too simple. I'm above this, I'm not about this, and that's okay. I mean, they clearly and should be out of it if they feel that way, but they should just communicate, in a clear way. Hey, that's your style, I like this, and then just show your alternate. And then, but they don't give the courtesy of that communication. It becomes an assumption. And then you begin to feel very asinine about how the relationship is going because they just sort of, are, maybe you feel that they kind of ditch you for certain, or can become combative if you're sort of asking too many questions, or if you're, wanting, them to be involved in something, that they kind of should be. There's some clear boundaries of like, this is important and this is non-essential. It's just like if they can't show up and just be real, that they're always putting on an act, as if they're always trying to get a laugh, when they're just showing up to be, they're just, they can't have like a natural discourse. It usually has to be tinged or tainted with some sort of dynamic that's going to involve a receiving reward for them, and then you giving up of the laugh, applause, or whatever it is. But there's, they love attention. And they love to be around people who breed that attention, who then are in that like little higher up, that little, next step up, for people, for a gang, to where they get together, and to have the finer things, the people who and all that sort of stuff, and that starts rolling. So, believe it or not, you're kind of, you're sort of intertwined in, but you're also kind of free, but you're going to feel some grief. You're going to feel some loss of the relationship in your mind you thought was there that wasn't. You're going to feel some sort of sadness inside because they couldn't really befriend you in the way that you wanted. You felt, a certain way you wanted, and they could not meet you there, and maybe they were not mature enough, or maybe it was just it was just not right. And, so you don't have to like lower your standards or lower yourself in your own light. Oftentimes that's what people do, is then they tend to then see all these blemishes, like, or, if they're going through the grief, they're feeling the loss and the void of that, and very saddened by these things, because that oftentimes because of a vision or your prefrontal cortex, which can only be sort of liberated when everything else is okay. In other words, if you're not fighting for the relationship or fighting to communicate, you can actually, plan some things. You can use better judgment. There's some sense of right or wrong. There's some sense of where things are going to go. And it does have to have some degree of predictability and planning and reliability, although enough, the narcissist will then throw it off if anything gets too okay. Trust me, there will be something made wrong, even if everything's okay, just to sort of look at the narcissist spill, their hundreds out of their, or look at them with their car or whatever it is, and then just sort of try to steal the thunder from a situation. And it can be like even something like someone else's wedding or birthday. I mean, they're just trying to turn it around and be all about them, and they try to overshine, oftentimes through fears, sort of impregnating that fear or concern, which often is very disarming. People thought, in the beginning, maybe it was like very small and overlooked, but then over time, it can become more accentuary and really definitive in the relationship. And, maybe they don't like grow out of, they don't mature into, let's say, something or somebody that would then merit the fabric of a relationship, of basically a commitment of that's based on pretty much honesty and truth. I mean, when we get right down to it, there has to be that, and that mutual understanding. If there's, some switching of doors, and switching of phones and switching of key fobs and numbers, and this is in this pocket and that picture's over there, and then there's a lot of manipulation going on, which oftentimes this is becoming even, part of now how everything is going on. Even a lot of the companies that we use are becoming more so like that, where you don't so much get to have a say. You think you think the computer is having a temper tantrum. I think it's actually the company basically like, we're slowly but surely removing your rights as a consumer. Excuse me, this might take a while. And then, basically, or you're on hold for like 30 minutes, and it's like all the burden is like placed on you, the consumer, or you, the quote unquote supply, or you, quote unquote, the other, yet to be named, undefined. Oftentimes they won't define you, or they will define you by something that they will conjure up in their mind. More so, they will create a position, if you will. They'll create a position for you that oftentimes is based as if you had like maybe applied while you were in your sleep. You are not consciously knowing you had applied or signed up for specific things in this relationship, but believe it or not, they will bring it. Whether it be moments of lying, moments of withdrawing of attention when aptly or needly required. Those oftentimes are ways of someone who can just deflect responsibility. Like, I want no responsibility. They want the relationship, but no responsibilities attached. They want to just be able to go out, have their way, do their fling, do whatever. And, you'll be then on a hunt and prey situation. You'll be trying to sort of it'll be a chasing after sort of whimsical affair. And, that, might be exciting for maybe a night or two. And, and then you get the, back, oh, they were just, oh, la, la. Yeah, but then when it's kind of like, they're always sort of going to be in that way, and yet other people don't have a problem with it, so it's because you can, sense that they're not committed, that they're not all there, and then they want to deflect it onto you. You're not all there. You don't have enough going on. You are boring. Usually as a narcissist and a psychopath, they kind of, I would say, must feel that really 99% of the world is beneath them, or maybe a smaller larger percentage, but who are really up to their par, or who are up to, what's the word I want to use, who are up to, who who are up to their grade of person. There's a word that I'm looking for that, I'm going to pull up in a minute, but, you're not up their caliber. The caliber is like, well, and then the caliber is going to be estimated by maybe your retirement fund, what kind of hair you have, your shoes, how much you can, whatever, your job. I mean, there's going to be a long list, like, before you feel like you get in the door with a narcissist, They're going to, and you're just trying to, hey, how are you? And they're, just sort of figuring you out, and then they're like, I'm going to play this for this, and then and then they try to be sort of, just sort of hustling in the relationship, if you will. But even in situations of business and otherwise, where it's simply, there's no accountability factor, there's no transparency, there's no honesty. And for maybe the narcissist or psychopath, that might be a requirement, that there isn't any honesty, commitment, or accountability, because they need an out. They don't like to be accountable. They don't feel that they should be held to this sort of accountability, or they shouldn't be held to any requirements of communication, that they should sort of, just because of who they are, which to be yet unnamed or undefined, but I guess might be all of the trappings of success you would think. Bank account, real estate, cars, I mean, whatever it is, So if that's, but pretty soon, those sort of, sometimes those sort of organizations thrive. Often, sometimes they don't thrive. Sometimes they don't shut down, but a relationship shouldn't be like it's open and then it's shut again. I mean, this is, that's difficult. That's difficult, I think, for someone to endure, or to try to always have to win the attention of another. Oh yeah, once, like we're saying, maybe after a couple times, it's exciting. It brings out the best in you. You get your best shoes. You start, going to the dentist. You start doing your biceps or whatever. You're working your muscles, or you're eating better, and you're like, yeah, but then, it's just sort of, it's only for that moment, and it becomes for something fleeting, and that's not what you had bargained or sort of signed up for. But the problem oftentimes is that there's a misleading or deception, of that. And they, for the narcissist, they don't have any problem with it, because it's like, well, of course you knew I was kidding all the time. They're of that, well, and they'll sit there, they can change their tone in a very dramatic way, where it's just like, everything's okay. And then if there's something, I mean, you can get like cold chills, even if you're in Hawaii. I mean, you go, oh my God, like, there's a beast, or there's like a really immature, undeveloped, grieving child who has been put away and has not been talked to, or like, for the person that they are, because if they don't put on a front, they're considered unlovable, up for rejection, not permittable. And they'll always sort of be like, well, nothing else is good enough. And so their temper tantrum will be like a way for them to only associate with like high status people, or above. It'll sort of help, push people away. And that can be like super unfortunate for people who have given into these said tantrums, or made a commitment or a relationship, whether it's a workplace, whether it's a marriage or a family, based on that urgency. It's like, you better not own, your own Saturday, because this isn't going to go through now, or this has to be done. In other words, you find that you have to have your gears constantly shifting, and it might be even within the same day, the same hour. I mean, but people learn to take a back seat like really quickly. And it's like, well, assumed like, well, of course you're going to take a back seat. And then pretty soon it's just like, yeah, I'm backseat Joe. Like, I'm just, who am I? It's just like, you're just whoever's behind you, and you're just, it's just a strange way of dominance, but it allows them to get in and out very quickly. These people love their freedom. They love to be able to make sure that sort of any sort of feel good moments that you feel where there could be some gelling or bonding, that they make sure that the boundaries are crossed. So just as soon as like the bond is taking place, they're going to reach onto your plate and like take, may I, and of course, and they're going to just, take the best cut of whatever off your plate, or they're going to, your drink looks just like so remarkably amazing, and then, or just other things, like they just will do strange things, either by not responding, but oftentimes it's going to involve things like currency, funds, like if your children are like this, oftentimes, kids, and I think young adults can be so mesmerized with technology, like the millennials, that they, like, that world is more real and more important oftentimes than other people, meaning like they're so in their own world that you have to kind of conform. And it shouldn't, to be a conformist, there are certain systems and certain roles that people take, but they shouldn't be unfair roles, ones that you'd want to quit the next day if you had to show up for work in that family. You'd be like, I'm not even a janitor. I'm not even, I can't even have a birthday. I can't, or, whatever it is, you're relegated to something less than. And usually that's done by, having a temper tantrum and trying to like build the bigger emotional episode in that moment versus the rest. In other words, they always have to hit it higher. They always have to one up it. There's, and so you could, people get into debt trying to stay in a relationship or stay in business with these people. They keep upping the ante, upping the gain. Oh, well, we're going to go for 3 weeks. We're going to go, for 5 weeks. We're going to go, and then it's just like, well, and then for anyone, like a couple of days would be extravagant, and then they're talking about how, 6 weeks is going to be the, new 1 week or whatever, and it becomes very much a battle of, as if you're in some sort of marathon, and you're treated as a very severed or part type of person. In other words, you're not treated as a whole person. You're as what they think you should be. In other words, you're as an employee should be, or a husband should be, or, but in their eyes, but in other words, should be. In other words, you should make this and this money, or your family should be doing this and this, or this and this and this. In other words, there's always something outstanding that they have that you don't have. So the relationship is defined by what by the negative, meaning I don't have, and then people's identity, then they rehearse it again and again, like they're trying to, when you talk about learning something, it's done by repetition. And so if you have these negative messages that have been circulating for the longest, you're going to know these feelings really well. Like you're going to know these by heart. You could know these in your sleep. You could be on put down mode 24/7. Because deep in the, gut of your bowels somehow, for some way, you feel this. And this is erroneous feeling, basically erroneous processing. This is erroneous consumption of people's energy. You really have to look at this as a consumption problem, meaning to what degree can I say I'm consuming that negative feeling that sort of doesn't give me space to be, or is not sort of giving me respect, or just like clarity. They're trying to always sort of talk to you like someone that they want you to be. And you don't feel that they ever see you or hear you for who you are, who I am. In other words, like you could be an artist or a photographer and they want to see you as an architect. And they'll just be like, well, how are the drawings going? And you're like, oh, well, we photographed in Tahiti. And, you always feel like, okay, well, I'm guilty for living your life. It's an existential threat. Like you feel really that there's something wrong, and then what happens is then people then don't know how to live their life, which is a very difficult thing to say, but and it's a very sensitive thing. But sometimes then people don't know how to proceed in the relationship, how to communicate. More this, less that. They get into a battle. They get emblazoned. They will ruin special occasions. They'll miss out. They'll just be oftentimes what's in a brooding state, just like, letting things stew, and then just like work it up. And you can almost, time it. And oftentimes it has nothing to do with reality. It has nothing to do, there's just sort of a blame thing. And there can be a lot of reasons for blame. You wanted to go to bed at a reasonable time. You were playing it too conservative in their eyes. Whatever it is, you were not oriented in the right direction according to what they felt was where they wanted to be. Even though, when people get right down to it, that tantrum mode, the yelling, oftentimes it's because they've conditioned people in their environment to be and respond and be like that. And I think some people, they can be very, very flexible and adaptable and not be bothered at all by being criticized, judged, talked about behind their back, for whatever reason. They're just looking for an outlet, and it has nothing to do with who you are, being imperfect, less than, unlovable. You are lovable. You are not to be rejected. You're to be welcomed into the world. You're to be welcomed into what you want to do. You're to be welcomed into pursuing and being able to have a vision and being able to know who can be there and who can't, and to know what your own equilibrium will and should be. So you have to oftentimes go into a discovery mode when you're into a recovery mode and getting your stance back on, because if you've already, responded to a lot of these temper tantrums, you've already been the person who, gives in, who makes the dinner, who brings the this, who did the that, who canceled this for that, and, took your, the unselfish route. And oftentimes that's in the name of love, or Mother Teresa, or like all the books that I read in college about Gandhi, and then, nonviolence, and the importance of altruism, and these things but sometimes altruism in the wrong place, can really be gnarly, and it doesn't flow. Like there's something, more special about them than you. And it will, even though you are special, it's just how they want or make others feel. And they'll use their own medicine, or, they'll use their own quips against you. In other words, you can't win at their enigma or their style of relating. It's meant to be that sort of non-touchable, untouchable, like the movie in the 80s. Actually met that guy with the white suit who played Frankie. What was his name? Oh my gosh, was that the 90s when they had the Excalibur Club in Chicago? Billy Drago, was that his name? He played Frank Nitti. The Untouchables, a classic movie filmed there, and I did meet that gentleman, just sort of, I guess while he was in Chicago, and, but anyway, but they are like, they try to sort of be that untouchable, like that movie. In other words, whatever mafioso, hey, they just, it ain't happening. They're going to make sure that they've got that sort of grit, or whatever, or something about them. Maybe they're just so refinedly polished that, you should just, of course, be gone with the wind, you peasant, or it's basically kind of how they will, try to brush people off. And that's after you've treated them as king or queen. I mean, in other words, the behavior doesn't match the treatment that they give you. There's a mismatch. It's a miscommunication. And, and you have to be able to take out, your truth in some place. You can't be bottled up. If you think your relationship is supposed to like be an outlet or be a place for you to go and communicate and do things and explore the world, and it's part of your future, in fact part of your future might be dependent on it or require it, such as in the case if you have parents who are narcissistic, the family is going to be all about them and how they judge others to behave. So those kids don't even have a chance to be who they're going to be. They're going to be, they're going to be judged, and they're probably going to be very insecure. So because the narcissist, no matter what, they kind of need things to be about them, and without things being said, and that's very well fine and good. They could have, but it's, as I always say, with people of affluence, there's people who can have just a gorgeous home, all my, windows that just open to the heavens, and they can just be casual and nice and approachable, or they can come off as, brusque and like, don't even stop smelling the air by my house. Like, are you kidding me? Do you think I'm crazy? It's just like they'll give you, it's just like, it's just, and you think about all things in the world, of all things to absorb your time and your energy in, you really want to get rid of that entanglement that keeps you in the back and forth. And so that back and forth with them really needs to be erased. It needs to be eliminated, and it needs to be kind of scrambled, meaning not what you tune into, you register in as if on a radio, because you dial in the relationship and here it all comes. And it blurts that out and it tunes this out, and their song, but it's, in other words, you don't want to have, that sort of situation at time and time again. And I think you have to basically come to terms with what is wanted, even just from your own self. But oftentimes it's caught up in so many different things that you have to back down and look and say, this is what I want and what I need, and being able to say no to someone who you've already given into before. In other words, who you can show your strength to in the midst of the worst of it. You're not falling, your head isn't falling over, your shoulders aren't slumping, you're not starting to cry, you're not starting to overheat, go into meltdown, go into freak out, because your emotional bases are covered. You've got a handle on you. You shouldn't and don't need to always have a handle on them. The narcissist or psychopath will love for you to always have a handle on them, especially if you're that kind of person. But realize that it can be sort of consumptive of you, and not be a good go-to place, so you kind of have to put something else in its place, meaning I'm going to come to myself. Rather than checking in with them, I'm going to check in with myself, and that's the best. It's the best when and then develop a new habit, develop a new horizon, begin to have a vision forward that isn't tainted or soured or diminished or minimized or ripped or afraid, from sort of interference that they try to cause, because they'll try to cause sort of that interference in relationships and within you, to get you to follow, and kind of dance to their tune. And that can be very lovely if it's good for both, but it's not nice when you find that you're showing up for the dance and they're not there. You're showing up for the other party and they're not there. And then you're showing up for your own birthday and they're not there, or you're showing up, and then you just find that somehow You don't know what happened, but something happened and you're supposed to mysteriously figure this out, and they shut down communication and then they shut you down, and you can't be that person. You can't say I am to that. That's being enabled. No, you have to say I am to what is stronger, and you are the stronger. I mean, that's already you, but you have to be able to look ahead, meaning that prefrontal cortex, which has been so scrambled oftentimes when you're in relationships that cause this sort of communication by someone who is very attention seeking, meaning it kind of removes your sort of your priorities, or like their decadence gets in front of your priorities. Their decadence gets sort of ahead of your own horizon, what you're shooting for, like truly, and it might involve the other person, either personally or in business. And you find you're either dragging your feet, you're holding off, you're waiting, you're being strung along, and you didn't realize, what was the substance of the relationship. And, when it comes right down to it, you have to say, I'm learning what makes better sense for me. What makes better sense for me is. What makes better sense for me is. What makes best sense for me is. And start putting you in the equation rather than always sublimating it with the narcissist. The narcissist is so attention seeking. It's almost as if they have overridden your own firewall of self-preservation, where your I am is inextricably, enmeshed with their I am. And it's like rocket science if you're trying to simultaneously, like, please them and live your life, like, and computing and like calculating, and not able to like be present in your own life. If they don't allow that, the narcissist oftentimes, because then they know that you could see through, things would be too real, it's too boring, there isn't enough trouble, there isn't enough engineered chaos, there isn't enough of that conditions going on to sort of, which once again, I mean, these are all situations which are on a continuum. But what I'm saying, when it becomes a problem in relationships, when it begins to cause relationship issues, and another is being basically sort of, for lack of better attention, sort of ignored, and just hope that they will sort of forget about things, and they'll sort of, just forget that they need this in a relationship, and then, carry around with the half the glass and say, well, maybe I should say half is full, and then pretty soon they're like, wait, can I have that last drink? And then they'll hand you the empty glass. You'll be like, what happened? Well, you got to carry your own glass. You got to carry your own glass around. You got to make sure your own glass is full. If you aren't watching that, then why aren't you? Then why are you, why have you permitted that? And how can you see now that's something that you can change? And something you can then desire to change. So desire is going to be felt in the solar plexus. So not just in the head, it's I desire, and then you desire that, and then you put that forward, and then with the idea and then goal and objective of realistically attaining that. And if you've got people who are just players, meaning they they're not in it to win it with you, or they're not in it with a commitment, or they have some other sly way, back alley, whatever it is, that they feel that they can always escape to and get away with, is sort of where they always get that win, in the relationship. And sometimes that's cute, but oftentimes it's not cute, sometimes it's not, because they want you to like be like in awe. Like there's a certain desire, I would say, that these people who crave attention, they crave attention. In other words, that they want you to pay attention to the point where you feel jealous, where you're like, wow, you have so much nicer furniture, you have such nicer food, you have such nicer carpets, you have such nicer bones, you're so skinny that you're just a skeleton, and we should be jealous of you because you've attained this slender or this physique that we can only dream of, because most of us have to work and we can't exercise 24/7 and live on cold pressed juice and like sushi or whatever people are doing. So yeah, it sounds like a good idea. Well, you know what I'm saying? Sometimes people are real, and that's okay. Like, but to a narcissist, this state, I feel, for some reason, it's very threatening to them. They do not like to visit that feeling. No way. They get uncomfortable, man. They want to exit stage left. They're like, let me go win another trophy, or let me go get another instrument or another pair of jeans, anything other than report for duty, showing up for a picnic. I mean, or something out, that's sort of what you might consider ordinary, but is lovely, is delightful. Like, because in their mind, nobody can sort of be better than them. I think they're very threatened by this, and maybe because they've had to hang their hat on that to get them through a lot of things. So they've relied on that aspect, and that automatically comes with this, that you've got to be, it's just sort of, you can't be happy. Like, but like, I've got to be the one who's happy because like, you're making me look bad right now. And it's like, you're just relaxing. You don't look bad. And it's like, your happiness is making me look bad. Like, so like just being content, for a narcissist, I think is like impenetrable boredom for them. A psychopath will tell you that they are very prone to boredom, just hanging around. Or, but it's like, but if you want to be productive, yes, but there's something else that they just sort of aren't interested in, other like just things that you would think would be built into the relationship. It'll just be nope. It's no go. I don't have to do that, and I just, and to a certain degree, they've hung their hat on that. It's gotten them where they've needed. They've counted on that. It's come through from them. They've survived. They'll call themselves a survivor, but they'll call themselves broke, even though they're, super wealthy or whatever. They are always worried that they don't have more than, I think, and it's a very sort of clinical place to be. Clinical meaning sort of not friendly, or inviting. And it can sort of be, it can be something for, after several moments, you realize that a certain reality isn't ensuing with them. And they might say that they want it sometime later, that there's sometime later that they're going to want it. But, and that's usually, it's too late. It could be like decades later, and it's not appropriate. It's not appropriate. So, coming back to that, you've got to feel comfortable with making your own amends and knowing that you are special and important, and like you have enough gifts just in your own personality that are there and that are growing, and that I hope you are growing and tapping into that. As we've been through a lot of these experiences in the channel, it's about sort of uncovering and discovering you, especially freeing up like that sort of resistance energy, like am I good enough energy, that defend and protect energy, which once you stop living in that posture, it can be very comfortable. And, but a lot of people say, am I regressing? They're afraid. Well, you might need time to just calm down, decompress. There's nothing wrong with knowing your needs and how you work. So you might need to decompress as you become maybe a very reactive person, meaning you're used to responding to others' needs and and stifling or snuffing out, like totally, there's a psychological term called extinction, like where you extinguish a behavior, like literally where you stop, realizing specific things that are good about yourself, like, and it's almost, that's not healthy. You have to say, wow, that relationship or that situation caused that blockage to be there, and I can loosen that up, and I can see and sort of grow from that, and not feel that you're like left behind, or that you're going to be too aggressive, or you're not going to appreciate who you are and what you were. I mean, I think maybe you're too afraid to admit certain things, like, oh, I'm glad that the relationship is over. Maybe that's a terrible thing to say. Well, what if it was a very hurtful relationship? Then maybe it's okay that the relationship is over. Maybe you didn't ever want to say that. Maybe you discovered it wasn't going to work. So it's okay to say that. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person, unlovable, rejected, that you're off, or any of these things. People begin to interpret these messages, oftentimes at the hands purely from judgment and criticism and fear. Basically, it boils down to some very toxic, potent ingredients. So realize that maybe you don't want to be in a heavy dose of anxiety and criticism. Maybe you don't want that in your relationships. I mean, that does exist. Oftentimes the narcissist or psychopathic relationship, they make it seem that's all that there is, and that's how they keep their people around. Their what they call their supply. But you've got things going on as well. So I hope you are able to better understand the role of this highly attention-seeking behavior, in realizing that it's not something that they really sort of grow out of. It's something that they might see eventually that they have an extreme need for. And, believe it or not, some people can give them the extreme attention, and they live just sort of in that embattled, just sort of Game of Thrones, just sort of relationship. At that level, they can't allow themselves to be at another level of comfort and to just be. They want to always have a lot of things spinning in the air, because it just reinforces their identity, but it can't be to the diminishment of yours. That can't be part of the feel good of, that can't be part of the relationship. So don't allow that to really, almost like shred you up to the point where you feel damaged or rejected or damaged. I think oftentimes people come out of these relationships feeling like they're damaged goods, like they've taken way too many sucker punches. Well, you know what? That will have its place. And as you realize that that's only a small part, and there's so much more of the world to discover that's waiting for you, and the world is like waiting for you as well. If you can release it and just say, just for today, I'm going to release the grief. Just for this hour, I'm going to release this grief and feel okay. Or just for this week, I'm going to release this grief. Oftentimes people have like a survivorship anxiety and guilt. So don't feel guilty about being happy and being a match for something positive, more positive for you, that can open up some doors, some smiles, some more productive professional growth, whatever it is that your goal is to become more of or do more of. Because other times, it's okay to say no. I need to be out, and as strong as you can say that, it's oftentimes difficult to say, because it's something the narcissist has been pushing away for so long, and you're still living according to their rules. This is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, and I hope that these videos do help. Please share, please subscribe, and thank you so much for your Patreon, and I'm glad you found us here. I hope you like these more vital discussions where we go kind of a little bit more into some of the other stuff, and it can be pretty salacious, and we're going to take comments and questions. So glad to find you here. Have a beautiful day.